Um, so we're here today for why good firms underperform and how to create a growth flywheel. Just a couple of little housekeeping bits before we get going. We'll run to 1 o'clock. It's a 60-minute session. We expect the content to take about 45, 50 minutes with around 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. If you do have questions as we go, if you wiggle your mouse, you should see a chat or a Q&A function at the bottom. It might be hidden under the three dots of more, but if you click there, you'll be able to enter questions as you go. We'll probably save questions until the end, but do feel free to put them in. If we just do a couple of quick introductions as to who you've got presenting to you today, I'm quite excited about this. I think there is something about, two heads is better than one, and three heads is probably even better. I think that we have seen, the three of us, this challenge around sort of underperformance and wanting to grow firms for a while now, and I think hopefully offering the three perspectives will be helpful, and slightly different to just each of us talking on our own. So I'm James Markham. I'm one of the founders of the Legal MBA, which offers commercial skills training to lawyers. Joanna, do you want to offer a couple of words?
Sure. Hello, I'm Joanna Gaudoin, founder of ClientWise, and firms come to me when they want a structured, confident, and consistent approach to business development that involves more of their people so they can grow.
Graham?
Hi, I'm Graham. I run Chorus Insight, a specialist market research company serving professional services firms. And we help firms to set up and run client feedback programs and conduct brand tracking studies so that you can make evidence-based business decisions.
Very good. Thank you very much. And more from each of you shortly. In terms of an agenda, essentially three sections for today. So the first looking at, I think, the importance of generating demand when it comes to growth, but also within that dynamic pricing. I think we can worry a little bit too much about volume and winning new work when you think about pricing. I think then Joanna will do a section on just really practical tips on how to develop new business and that business development angle. And then Graham, to that point around Chorus Insight, just giving some insights into, well, what are clients actually asking from their firms at this point in time, and probably some nuggets within there. I think our byline was how to create a growth flywheel, so we should probably fairly early doors say what on earth do we mean by a growth flywheel. And I think it is these three interrelated activities. I think when we were talking about bringing this webinar together, I think where we saw firms stumble and fall when it comes to growth was in one of or more than one of these areas. And it's that general commercial acumen of your lawyers, and particularly your senior lawyers and your partners. It's within the business development activities, and it's within the client insight. So our view, this growth flywheel, is to say, here are three activities, and if you can get them working well together, then I think you'll get the growth that you're after within your firm. So let's start in the top left with commercial acumen. I think just to very quickly maybe articulate what does commercial acumen mean. Within the training that we do within the Legal MBA, we sort of define it by essentially you need to join up the different elements of your practice. And if you think of top line fee income as typically the thing that you want to grow within your firm, shown here in the middle of the screen, there are two perspectives you can take. One is an internal or an inside out capacity driven perspective, which is looking at things like the number of fee earners, the number of billable hours, the effective hourly rate. You multiply them together and you get your fee income. And then you have an external and demand driven perspective. So the number of clients, the number of matters, and the average fees per client. Now, our views in the Legal MBA, myself and my business partner Darren, commercial acumen is having the skills to be able to balance all of these components. And particularly when you're trying to grow, you're actively trying to move that middle number of fee income up. It's keeping things in balance. Often the growth doesn't happen because one of these is acting as a constraint or a bottleneck to that growth. In terms of this session, we're going to ignore the right-hand side because this is around the client growth piece. So we're going to look at this external and this demand perspective. We're going to focus on the left-hand side. Now, Joanna's going to come to these bits, the business development, how do you increase the volume of work, how do you get more clients, more matters within the business. But before we get to there, I just wanted to spend some time talking through pricing. And I think this is important and relevant to growth, to essentially making sure that the growth in top line fee income is sustainable, that it's contributing to the profitability of the firm. It's not growth for growth's sake, because I think we see some of those unsustainable sort of revenue streams undermining the firm, undermining the profitability where that's not considered. So we're going to have a look at pricing next. And there are five key points to flag around pricing. The first is that pricing has a very big impact. It has an impact that's 3.5 times greater than just focusing on volume alone. There's an old study, probably 30, 40 years old now, from Harvard Business Review, where they looked cross-sector at 2,500 different companies, and they concluded that a 1% increase in volume generated a 3.3% increase in operating profit, but a 1% increase in price generated an 11.1% increase in profit. So sector agnostic, not just professional services, not just law firms, but the impact of increasing price by 1% was 3.5 times greater than getting additional volume at the same price. And there's a level of, I suppose, an intuitiveness to that. If you win more work in terms of volume, there's a delivery cost associated with that. You need people to go and deliver the work. Whereas with price would flow through to the bottom line. So pricing has this big impact, has a very big impact on profitability and the ongoing sustainability of the firm. The second point, and I'm going to sort of detour with a bit of a chart here. Inflation is now a thing. I've been looking at this is the Office for National Statistics data on legal services price inflation. I've been looking at this now every quarter, every waking moment for the last 5 years. And you see this trend here. You see a pre-COVID trend of sort of 2-3% bubbling along over, and to the left before 2017 as well. And you see this big ramp up. And I think I was expecting when you get to that peak of 7.5%, I was expecting that to maybe come back down, and we may be heading back down towards the pre-crisis trend of 3%. But it just isn't. I think we are, in round numbers, we're looking at instead of 3% every year, legal prices going up, we're looking at 6%. So we are, I think, in an inflationary environment, and that's a very different environment to the ones that firms had been working in up until sort of 2020. So it's structurally higher. Inflation is structurally higher at 6% rather than 3%. Now, I don't think there aren't many kind of generalized kind of rules around these trends. I think bigger firms tend to have done better over that period than smaller firms. They've invested in centralized commercial finance teams. They've invested in pricing teams. They've invested in commercial skills training for their senior lawyers. But actually beneath that, you've got a very uneven distribution in terms of, well, how has that inflation been experienced by firms? Have they benefited? Have they managed to achieve the price increases or not? And it's very, very mixed fortune. It's just a point of contrast. If the market as a whole is achieving 6% increases or 5.6% in 2025, residential conveyancing is actually down 3% in terms of its pricing. So if you think of sort of a full service law firm, yes, overall, you should, I would suggest, be aiming for 6% increase in achieved prices each year. But beneath that, you're going to have relative winners and losers, and that's a very challenging dynamic to manage. I think for the partners that we've been working with over the last couple of years in our training program, it has sort of coincided with this thing called AI that's been bubbling along in the background, and it does constantly come up. And I think there is a link through here to pricing where, for the majority of the partners in our training, they price with reference to the billable hour, which is a cost-based way of pricing work. Hours times rates, that's the price, plus or minus some discounting or a bit of premium pricing perhaps. But even on fixed fee work, so much of how we price within legal is based upon the billable rate and the billable hour. Now, that's a real challenge when we think about AI, because that's fundamentally a technology that's promising to take hours out of the delivery model. It's promising efficiency. So you've got this pricing model that's around how long did this thing take? You've got this technology saying, well, it's going to take less time. It shouldn't be a surprise that, well, if you don't do anything, that the prices are going to fall. And so we run another webinar around the impact of AI, and we ask a couple of surveys within that. the majority of the managing partners, so sort of 75% plus of the managing partners within that webinar expect that AI is going to save 25% of the time taken. So they're expecting 25% efficiency savings over the next couple of years. Now, that is, in the context of pricing, a huge threat to pricing and the sustainability of the law firm if we are still pricing with reference to how long the job takes to do. And we can illustrate this fairly simply on this slide. To go back to that model, again showing the left and the right-hand side here, if we are purely on a billable hour, and obviously it will depend, but in that traditional hours times rate model, average fees per matter will decrease by that efficiency saving by 25%. So 8,500 goes to 6 and a bit thousand. On the right-hand side, we see utilization falling by 25%. People have less work to do. And so in the middle, we see fee income dropping from 21 million to 15.8 million in a very simplified hypothetical example before we set too many hairs running. Now, there's clearly well, what is the firm's commercial response to AI? And there are various things that we can do. One of the things that we need to do, again, to particularly Joanna's section next, is we need to go and win more work. We need to increase the utilization. People need to do 3 matters rather than 2 matters, and therefore we need to fill pipeline with new opportunities. But the other thing we need to do is we need to think a little bit smarter around pricing, and we need to maybe not just pass all those efficiency savings through in the form of lower prices. So we can come back to our list of 5 key things. I think what we're seeing is where partners are currently saying I price with reference to hours times rate, that looks sort of like cost-based pricing. There is, I think, I've not, I've been in the sector 15, 20 years. I've not seen this level of interest in value-based pricing and a desire to move towards value-based pricing at any point. And I think that is certainly over the last probably 2-3 years, that's really increased. I don't see that interest waning in the short term. So there's this kind of, we see this problem, we see this challenge around AI. We need to move towards value-based pricing, so pricing with reference to the value we offer to our clients rather than pricing with reference to how long the thing takes to do. But those same partners, those same surveys are kind of saying that less than 10% of firms are predominantly based on value-based pricing. So there's this huge gap between recognizing the problem and this intent to move away from the billable hour and towards value-based pricing with ability, in terms of ability and traction and people actually making that shift. And I think that, I think value-based pricing is I think probably poorly understood. I think it's very, very different to hours times rate as a pricing mechanism. It's very, very hard to adopt value-based pricing and move towards it. And that's both I suppose a training thing, but then a broader thing around culture as well within the firm. This is a difficult journey that I think partners and firms are setting themselves up for. So that to my mind is the pricing landscape, if you like. Pricing has a big impact. Inflation is a thing we need to manage. AI is a threat. It's all very unevenly distributed. I just appreciate a quick poll. If I bring up a question and if I find the polls in the button, where are we? There we go. No, that's the wrong one. Sorry. I had my finger over the wrong poll. It's a good start, isn't it? That's the one. There we go. So that should now be the same poll as on the screen. So given that environment of high inflationary times, AI is going to have an impact on fundamentally how work is priced. And the impact is going to be very mixed. It's not a one size fits all to this. Just appreciate a bit of a sense check from those in the virtual rooms too of how confident you are that your firms have that confidence to price effectively in that context, in that landscape. I think I'm slightly regretting giving a middle of the road option. I'll share the results so you can see. The vast majority of you have gone with mixed. Some are better than others, which is if you say is it black or it's white and you give the shade of grey, everyone's gone for grey. But I think that probably does reflect. I think that does reflect the reality of what we're seeing in the firms we're working with and we're talking to. That it is just very patchy, and I think there is a real challenge for I suppose for the managing partners and the firm leaders on this call, as much as the individual partners, to work out where are those pockets, where's the relative underperformance, overperformance, and how can we help address that? I'll stop sharing that. Thank you, appreciate the interaction. And to just come back to our growth flywheel, so we've spoken about that top left side, the blue, the commercial acumen and the pricing. I think let's hand to Joanna now to talk through the second component, the green bit in the top right, and business development and winning more work. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, James. And of course, before we go and win more work, talk to prospective clients, we need to make sure we've got the commercial acumen, the skills that we need to do that in a confident way. So I think that's a good setup for what I'm about to say before we start to actually attract more potential work. So let's get cracking on this section. James, if you can just move there, thank you. So what on earth is business development? I was talking to a prospective client this morning and I said, do you think your fee earners have a clear idea of how BD differs from marketing? And she didn't have to think for very long before saying, no, absolutely not. And it's really essential because marketing is something that's done by the firm overall, usually one or two people, maybe an agency, and it's about raising awareness of your firm, positioning it in the market, saying why we're valuable at an overall level to you as a client. BD, we've got a definition here, it's just one, is about creating long-term value and growth for your firm by identifying, building and strengthening opportunities. And this is an individual task or a team task. It's about the people who actually know the value they bring to clients, going out and finding the right opportunities. And as James mentioned earlier, really thinking about the right opportunities, not just any opportunity, the opportunities that are going to be profitable for your individual practice areas is vital to consider. So when I go in and run big BD projects for firms, I typically start with an introductory session so that all the fee earners in the team department get to know me. And something I cover in that session is thinking about the difference between BD and marketing, because often what happens is we end up with a very overloaded marketing manager that's being expected to do BD as well. Some firms have BD people and they've definitely got a value in a place, but that doesn't mean client-facing teams shouldn't do BD. In fact, I have 12 beliefs about BD, and one of them is that if you're client facing, BD is essential, not optional. And I'll talk a bit more about why that is shortly. Just in case anyone on this call is not super clear about the difference between marketing and BD, and there is some grey, I'll give a very brief example. And it's actually based on a true story. So a friend of mine, let's call her Kate, inherited a large sum of money about a decade ago from an aunt who passed away. Lucky her. She'd always had good roles, but never had this amount of money. So she started Googling. Imagine a decade ago, there was no AI, no ChatGPT. So she starts saying, oh, I've inherited money. What should I do? And surprise, surprise, what comes up but a load of wealth managers, IFA type websites. And she starts looking through those websites. She starts looking at some profiles of the people, reading some articles, reading overall pages, maybe looking up some of the individuals mentioned on LinkedIn. She then starts contacting those people, those companies, and has individual conversations and gets a feel for whether she thinks they can help. She also goes for dinner at a friend's house and gets chatting to her friends about her problem of having money. And one of them says, actually, I was at an event last week and I met someone. He seemed a really great guy. He can probably help you. I think he was a wealth manager, planner. So I'll put you in touch with him. So everything to do with finding the websites, seeing the overall propositions on the websites is marketing. The minute it's getting to individual conversations with those financial planners, reading their profiles on LinkedIn, their individual profiles, not the company's profile, and certainly the person that went networking, that is BD. And that is why individuals need to do BD, because that's where it becomes real to the prospective clients. And that is the case whether it's B2C or B2B legal matters that you're offering. In fact, actually, if it's B2B, there's almost more risk for people, because if they make a wrong decision on their choice of lawyer, they've got to deal with that internally with their companies. So that can often be harder than a B2C decision. So that's a brief explanation of what BD is to make sure we're clear. So if we move on, and we start to think about why it's actually needed. Why do we need to do BD? Now, it's not a case of we put up a website and people come. We actually need people to go out and look for opportunities and build those opportunities so that we've got consistent financial performance. We don't have this big lumpy effect that we've got loads of work, then we've got nothing. We don't really know where things are coming from. And if we've got that reliance on inbound inquiries only, then we've got very limited control. Whereas if we're taking action and we're proactively planning and doing proactive BD, then if we are doing lots of things that we're measuring, we're likely to bring in more opportunities so we can achieve any growth objectives we've got. The other important side of this is developing people. The number of senior associates and even partners I have come to me privately and say, I'm now expected to bring in work, I have no idea where to start, is pretty phenomenal because they've never had any involvement or support with BD. So the earlier we can get people at least understanding that BD needs to happen and making some contribution, we are effectively succession planning for our firm. And it's less hard to know who to promote. We're promoting more well-rounded people that not only have technical excellence, but they are able to bring in work as well. And I'm really passionate about making that happen. And when you have this present in your firm, you will also attract better people, the best talent as well. So a few reasons there why it's needed. And let's have a look at the next piece, which is, hey, James, going to move on. Yeah, what's actually happening in many law firms right now. So actually, we've got a limited number of people contributing. So most departments have got a minority of fee earners contributing to winning and retaining work. So not a great situation to be in. There's a client I'm working with at the moment, and one of their teams last year, their revenue was cut dramatically. I think it was roughly 40-50% because they had unexpected sickness. And the people who were off sick were the BD people. So very risky, that sort of situation. We've got a stop-start approach. I'll talk about this a bit more in a minute, but essentially we'll have a flurry of BD, but we've not really thought about what we're doing. We're not really sure if it works, and then we don't continue. We've got linked to the limited number of people contributing, lack of team approach. We've got people working in silos, literally within a department, people holding on to contacts, not looking at how we can optimize this across the whole team and get people involved. When you've got more of the team involved, you can actually focus on the more senior lawyers doing the key relationship building, but getting the juniors to do things like researching intermediaries, researching events, useful things that gets them used to thinking about BD and provides vital support to senior people. So we're not maximising use of human resource within the team, massively underutilised, and we're definitely not maximising cross referrals within the firm. This is something I see all the time, and someone gave it a nicer name than this. Sometimes it's called cross-selling. I was on a legal event, a retreat last week, and I'm speaking there, and someone had a nice term. They called it cross-serving. So if you think about how can you serve your clients more broadly. So we've got loads of firms where we've got clients coming to you and utilising a certain service within your firm, maybe in your commercial team, but then they're going to another firm for their private matters when you could service them there. Now, not only are you losing the private matter work with the second firm, but actually if that firm's really good at developing their client relationships, becoming that trusted advisor, then potentially you lose the commercial work too, because they develop them so well that they take that. So much money is literally being left on the table. And a quick one on this, the two main drivers of this, why this is happening, is that actually in law firms, colleagues don't understand the value other departments bring. They might know we have X department, but they don't really understand what benefits that department bring to clients, what risks do they mitigate, problems solve. So that's issue one. And so they don't know how to look out for it within their clients. And also, they don't have good relationships with their clients in other departments. So they feel it's too risky to refer them across because they don't know how their valued client is going to be dealt with. So that is a massive gap in many, many firms. So I'd like those things not to be happening because there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of limited growth. So let's have a look at the next slide, where we're going to look at this false start BD loop, which is the start stop that I mentioned, because this is what happens a lot of the time. There's maybe a quieter spell, so a bit less work. So we go, oh goodness, must do some BD. We get people doing some LinkedIn posts. We get some people going to some local events. Maybe someone even writes an article. But we haven't really thought about it. We haven't planned it. We're certainly not measuring what's delivering back. When I say measure, I get people to measure input and output metrics. So it's not just what work do we actually get from certain BD activities, it's what effort have we put in. Because sometimes people go, oh, I've been to this event twice, oh, it doesn't work, haven't had any work, need to dump that and move on, without actually really thinking, well, have we been to it frequently enough? Have we had the right skills to develop the conversations? Have we really worked at it in the right way to give us the best chance of results? If we have, then fine, review, don't do that activity anymore. But a lot of the time that's not happening. So we don't see results, we give up. We might give up because we're overwhelmed, we're trying to do too much. So I was working with a firm on Monday on their BD strategy and plan for a department, and they had an awful lot there. And I said to them, you really want to look at, is this realistic for you to do all of this in the next 3 months, for example? It's better to do less, do it well, get results, people are motivated and move forward and continue, than just to stop, particularly when you get busy, because then for those reasons, BD activities stop and we're back in the same place again. So important to think about that. And actually, I had the head of department of a client recently say to me, yeah, I used to be really busy and I wish I'd thought about BD then, because I didn't think about the time when I might be quieter. And of course, BD is not something that you can tomorrow get results from. It's a little bit like, I want a glass of water. I can't have a glass of water if there's no plumbing system in my house. It takes time and it's a marathon, not a sprint. You can have quicker wins depending on what you're doing. I look at how I can optimize what people are already doing as well as do new things. But it is a longer term game that you need to plan for and look at carefully. So let's have a look on the next slide as to why this is actually happening, why we've ended up in this situation in law firms. So firstly, it's not part of professional training. So no lawyers really tackle BD when they're doing all their qualifications, and even once they're in a law firm doing the final elements, very few firms even talk about BD. So then it's not seen as a normal part of the role of being a lawyer, unfortunately. By the time I retire, I kind of hope that's never, but whenever that is, maybe it's when I die, that I hope that won't be the case, that it will be upfront for lawyers, because it's absolutely essential if firms are going to grow and even exist still. Secondly, people think their qualifications are enough, but sadly not. If you're in a firm that's been around a long time, then people are going to assume you've got great legal abilities. If no one knows about you, they can't choose you. It's definitely not enough. Thirdly, time. James mentioned AI in terms of pricing, saving time. As AI comes in and hopefully takes away some tasks, this frees up more time to do things that AI can't do well, like the actual end BD, the relationship building. And if we've got more time, we need to bring in more work. So the example I gave of what the partner said a few moments ago about the important, urgent, you might feel like you've got no time now, but I'd suggest you really need to make time now to plan for the future and the work you're going to need. So yeah, what do they say, that presenting and public speaking is more feared than death? I think BD is quite up there as well. I would say lots of lawyers look in horror at the thought of what they see as selling. But actually, I don't see it as selling. Yes, it's bringing in work, it's bringing in money, but it's providing services for people that really need them. It's not like me maybe going to a coat shop. I own goodness knows how many coats already, and I get tempted to buy another coat. If someone really needs a legal service, they really need it. It doesn't tend to be something that's optional. It's either, as I said, protecting them from something in the future, mitigating that risk, bringing a clear benefit, or dealing with a challenge now. So it's important to think about that as a mindset piece and helping you deal with doing BD, but also how you position services. Also, focus. So if we've got no focus, we're not really sure what we're aiming at, then that's going to be hard for people to do BD. And if they don't know what activities to do, and when we look at what activities to do, we're looking very clearly at, do we want to generate from all three levers of BD? So existing clients, introducers and new clients. Maybe we do, maybe we don't straight away. So new clients are often the exciting one, but they're hardest. So if you haven't currently got a BD strategy and plan in your firm, then I would say focus on one or two of those levers, probably existing and introducers, depending on what area of law. People then need to have the skills to, if they're going to go, for example, to networking events, and BD isn't all about networking, but if they're going to go networking, they need to be able to navigate a room. Otherwise, they end up in what I frequently see, the group of lawyers in the corner enjoying the wine and canapes, but not actually meeting any people, not knowing how to join groups, have conversations and follow up. So from our what, our activity plan, we need to be really clear that people know how to activate that. And finally, embedding it. So how do we make sure BD is part of everyday working life? We've got people learning from each other, sharing what's going on, reviewing what's happening. So those are the blockers, and I'd really encourage you to think about what are the main ones for your firm. Might be all of them, but you need to tackle that, because then that determines what do we need to do to overturn them. So moving on to the next slide, the key unblockers here are getting people to understand why they need to do BD. That's fundamental. Someone said to me recently, well, it's in the competency. So yeah, they should know why. Maybe, but they also need to really believe it. Otherwise it won't happen, along with embedding it and making sure they're accountable. They need to know what to do, what's in that plan overall for the team to do, what's against their name, and importantly, how to do it, as I just talked about, the right skills to do the things that's expected of them. So those three things are fundamental for getting BD working well in your firm. And we're going to move on really briefly now to my model. So this is the framework I have developed over recent times to help lawyers think about, and other professional services people, to be fair, think about how to approach BD and what's necessary, because it can feel a bit of a intangible element that they need to consider. Now, if you'd like the guide for this, where there's 2 pages per P to help you think about this a bit more, you can see a QR code top right, and I'll be sharing it again at the end. But if you'd like to request that, I'll give you more on it. I'm going to really briefly explain these. So if we're aiming to get to a BD culture, so ultimately grow our firm by doing BD, we need there to be more people doing BD and it be part of business as usual. That starts with a commitment to doing BD differently and committing time and budget, essential. We then need people to be super clear on which services we're proactively taking to the market. Doesn't mean we can't offer others if people come, but what are we being proactive about, and for which clients? If we don't define that well, we can't do the right activities. We need people building their own profiles well in the market and thinking about how they engage with people. Do they have impact with people? We need that clear plan with the responsibilities and metrics and timing that I talked about. We need people having the right skills to deliver that plan. And we need people aware of politics, that people have different views, assumptions, agendas and beliefs internally and externally. And we need to consider those when we're conducting our business development. And then we need to integrate it, embed it in the firm by having those mechanisms to review at different timescales. And I help firms work on what that looks like for their individual teams and at a firm level. So that's an extremely brief overview. As I said, you can download it there. So hopefully that gives you a good view of BD and what you need to think about in your firm to take forward. We're going to finish this section off by a poll, I believe, that James is going to bring up for me. So, as I say, I could talk about this topic all day, but we don't have time for that. So, I wanted to give you some food for thought. What are the couple of things you can take away? So, I'd like you to vote on what main action could you take to move your firm forward from wherever it is with VD? So, are you already doing some things? So, it's about looking at that and seeing what's working, what's not. Is it saying to colleagues, actually, this isn't working, we want to grow, how do we do this differently? Is it about involving junior team members? Maybe they're currently very left out, which means they're not contributing for the now and they're not developing for later. Is it working on specific elements of the 5Ps or something else, which you're very welcome to share in the chat? So we'll give you a few seconds to vote on that, and then James will share what we've got there.
I think we've got a few shy people, but I'll last call. There we go. I'll
Let's see.
and share the results now. So the majority
We
coming
got?
through with that first one there.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing and what's working, not working.
Yes, I mean there may have been, I didn't have all of them on there, but there may be some of you struggling to choose because there might be a variety of ones you need to work on. So please do remember what you voted, take that away and think about what that means for what's next for you. And I'm now going to pass over to Graham because once you've brought in your new clients, you're getting more work from your clients, you want to keep them happy and understand what makes them tick and how you need to evolve your services and your client service to keep them and build over time. So I'll pass to Graham now. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, well, having heard about business development, I'd like us to take a trip to marketing land because if we want to produce that profitable commercial offer that James has talked about and have a targeted and suitably positioned BD effort, as Joanna's described, then we need to think about where are we getting our client and market insight from? Or indeed, are we collecting any at all in the first place? So what I observe is that most professionals rarely leave the world of product because, of course, they're at the front line delivering the service, and so they are in effect themselves the product. And while marketers know they know their way around all of marketing land, the expectation within firms is usually that they should spend all their time working on promotion, which is rather frustrating because, of course, the best firms and the best leaders within those businesses use market research to understand client needs, and they take that and they use it to formulate and execute strategy. And so my question to you now is, are you getting quality insight into your business? I've got some stats to share, but yeah, we've got a little quiz here, the little poll asking where you are in terms of feedback and monitoring client relationships. So, how would you describe your firm's current approach to client feedback or client listening? And it's the options there ranging from that sort of ad hoc, sporadic, through to something that's much more embedded and strategic, that's done on an ongoing basis. So I'd be really interested to see where you are on that scale. And as I say, I've got some examples to share as well.
We've got a little flurry coming. There we go. I think the flurry stopped. I'll share those results so everyone can see them. I think you're maybe in category 2, formalised but occasional.
Okay, so this is interesting to see. Yeah, so there's at least one or two who have got that fully embedded strategic piece, and at least some have got the makings of it. There's some structure. I suppose that's interesting to see because CX has begun to sort of professionalize over the last 3 or 4 years, and you can sort of see that within the results there. I've got some other research that we've done. Now, normally, I'm all about robust sampling and methods, but I've done the most unscientific piece of research here, and that's why I'm going to present it on the back of a virtual envelope. So that's these stats. And this comes from just from conversations that I've had, mostly with BD and marketing leaders over the last 2 years. And what we see is now most firms do have some sort of structured feedback function in place. And I'm not talking about directories or review solicitors and that sort of public facing testimonial type of feedback. I'm thinking more about the honest, constructive feedback that you're using internally within the business for improvement so that you can win more work, so that you secure relationships. And I suppose it's no surprise that adoption of client feedback is growing because the benefits are huge. And the way I see the payoffs is primarily it's the growth, the retention of clients, and occasionally getting rid of the undesirable ones. The little framework that we use is this one. Sorry, sorry, James. That was my nudge. Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to retain, we're going to grow and retain clients, and occasionally divest ourselves of the undesirable ones. And of course, there's lots of other secondary benefits that help to improve the business too, whether it's around sort of service innovation, whether it's how you promote and enhance the brand. Hopefully, lots of operational change as well that comes out of it, along with cost savings. And in terms of the methods, there are lots of different ways of collecting feedback, but the two that get used most in legal and in accountancy are interviews and surveys. And among the firms that I work with, I'd say there's about a 50-50 split between the two. Interviews, of course, they give you lots of depth of understanding. They help you uncover patterns and trends. You really find out what's new and what's emerging. Uh, and they help you ultimately build relationships, even just as an exercise themselves. They warm and build relationships that you have with clients. But of course, they're time consuming and they're expensive to do, which is why it's good that we've also got online surveys, because that's the methodology you can use to reach clients really at a great scale. And of course, they're cheap to run and you get insight very quickly. That's the key benefit there. But of course, getting interesting points of view is nigh impossible because while people will give you lots of ratings and they'll tick boxes on all that kind of thing, the trouble is getting the rationale behind the scores. That's the difficult part, which is why I recommend using both methodologies wherever possible. Got a couple of quick examples. The first one is Stone King. They went all in on depth interviews last year. We conducted 38 interviews with clients and referrers, and that took us about 3 months, which is much quicker than the norm, actually. So most firms, that sort of number, it would take about a year to get them done. And what was important about it was that they got major strategy insights and they're implementing lots of change. You see the quote there from the CEO that she's using voice of client within the business. It's informing and it's driving the strategy. And the other sort of end of the scale, Hayes Mack have gone the volume route, and they've got this mind-boggling amount of data that gives them KPIs and dashboards galore. But more importantly, what it's doing is it's allowing them to track large numbers of individual client relationships and to really focus on them, nurture them, and grow those relationships and revenues. I think as their growth sort of evidences over the last couple of years. Now, regardless of the mode that you use, however you're engaging clients, the types of questions we typically ask are around these kind of subjects. So we go into relationships, service experiences, reputation. There's always a lot on innovation and technology. They're the things that are always emerging and changing. And ultimately, what is it we've got to do to fix, to improve retention of clients? That's the key thing. And these are all really good topics. I think they should always be covered wherever possible. But what I see is that the firms that are growing the fastest, when we look within our sort of growth flywheel, they're the ones that are treating research as a commercial opportunity. So they're the ones that are asking about buying behavior. They want to know about selection criteria, panels. They're asking about business needs. What's keeping people awake at night? What are the crucial things? And they're also not afraid to talk about price and money, really go into that. And as well as that, competitors. So those firms are asking questions that uncover the strengths and the weaknesses. As Joanna was talking about before, the vulnerability of a client once there's a competitor in there. Those firms are really trying to get to understand that and pick out the weaknesses of their competitors and offer things there. I think a lot of the private equity firms are the ones that are doing taking up a lot of those hidden opportunities. And I think the thing about it is that we can shy away from asking those things. But if you go in and frame your conversation as a market research piece, suddenly you get all the answers that you dreamed of. It's a great way to get the insight and the intel that you need. And now asking those kind of questions gives you outputs like this, what I would call proper management information that you can put in front of your board. So giving you evidence to actually back up your decisions. I think that's the thing that ideally, when the board get their pack for the next meeting, they've got the financial information in there. Have they got the market insight, the client insight? A lot of firms still don't have that, and that's a miss. But whatever questions you ask, I'd recommend for you always asking the recommend question. So that's the net promoter score. It's not perfect as a metric. There's always lots of criticism of it. But what I like about it is that it tells you in a very direct way what to do with those clients when you get the answers back. So someone's giving you a 9 or 10, they're a promoter, happy days. What else can we offer them? What's the opportunity? Who else might they refer us to? Um, how can we increase that sort of share of wallet? And if someone's sort of identified themselves as a passive, then we know that they're the ones who are vulnerable to competitors. So if someone comes along with a more appealing price, if they've got a different offer, there's more value add, then we know they're the ones we need to really work with to keep them loyal, to retain them. And the detractors are an interesting one because we know that either we need to fix those problems or stop servicing and offload them because toxic relationships are bad for everybody, whether you're delivering the service or receiving it, and those relationships are rarely profitable. And now, besides the usefulness at an individual level, when you get your net promoter score, the promoters subtracting the detractors, you get that score. You get to benchmark your performance. And I think comparisons with other businesses, that's what really brings client satisfaction to life, and it's what makes it relatable. So you can put in front of partners these kind of scores and say, well, where do you think your service is? Are you a BT? Are you a bit of a Waitrose, or have you reached the Jet 2 level? And even better, if you can compare against other firms within your industry. So at the moment, we've got a benchmarking initiative live, one for legal, one for accountancy. And you can use this kind of comparison to stoke people's competitive spirit. And you can really find out how you genuinely stack up. And within professional services, what I would say is it is very competitive. So the average for legal is very high, and it's very competitive. But coming back to our growth wheel and a flywheel, um, finally, I want to talk about how we're using continuous insight. So we've got a tracker running, started last year. And when we began, we were getting feedback like this. So that we've got a guy talking about, we've just started looking at firms who have more AI tools to offer us, and we can't afford to buy those subscriptions. But maybe the firms can sort of let us in on that, and it would be a big bonus. So 10 months ago, that was the new big value add, and there was all this fear of missing out. Now we're doing the same sort of interview in the start of this year, and now we're getting comments like this. So if I get another email from a law firm about generative AI, it's become almost an irritation to be sort of over promoting it. And people, as in this comment, were saying, stop trying that. Think about what we need. Try and think differently. And then a month ago, again, same line of interviewing, we're now getting less frequent comments about these things. And the conversation's gone back to, okay, well, yeah, we know about the AI solutions. They're the hygiene factor. I expect you to be using those and offering me them. And the conversation's come right back around to, okay, well, we want to have a commercial conversation here. We're expecting value-based fees. We're expecting alternative fee arrangements. And it's now again, so it's about our firms looking to understand our business. Are they asking us the right questions? So what I think it demonstrates is that if you're not regularly getting market and client insight, it's a big problem because things are changing quickly. If you're only going to market and doing some research once every 1 or 2 years, you're going to miss this change. And this is the real problem. If you want to evolve and grow the business continuously, you need that flow of market insight coming in because that's what allows you to position, promote, and price the firm for success going back into our flywheel. So yeah, I'm not sure, Joanna. I think you might want to come back in.
Thank you very much. So to give a little summary here of what we've covered, and we'll take some questions from you in a minute. Thank you, James, for talking about the commercial skills that we need our fee earners to have, making sure we've got a joined up strategy for growth, and ultimately have really thought hard about the pricing strategy what we want to have for that growth. Then you heard me walk through both BD and marketing and why they matter, but get more into how we can involve more of our fee earners in BD to have that structured and consistent approach. And I shared the 5 Ps with you to help you give yourselves and the rest of your teams ways to think about that. And we'll share the code for that again in a minute. And then thanks to Graham for looking at how we can look at client relationship opportunities and problems, and I think it's quite refreshing to hear that sometimes there might be clients we don't want to work with anymore for very good reasons, how we monitor progress and how we update our strategy ongoing by really listening to what our clients are saying to us. So hopefully 3 key areas for you to take forward and think about how can you get more growth happening in your firm. And then we've got the next slide where we'd love you to think about coming out of this, which action, if you were to pick one from each of the segments we've shared with you, do you need to consider, think about maybe before you take action, or maybe it's an easy win, you can take some action on immediately. What do you need to do? And who else might you need to involve in your firm to contribute to that, to build on that, ultimately to get to a growth flywheel? So please take some action from what you've heard today. If you don't, you might as well have gone out for a walk at lunchtime rather than joining us. So we'd really love you to do something as a result. To wrap up before we take your questions, 3 things here, one from each of us that you can take away. There's a copy of James's book, The Legal MBA, that you can request via the QR code there, and that's valid until the end of June. You can download my 5 Ps for proactive BD that hopefully will walk you through all the 5 Ps in a bit more detail, some checklists and examples there to help bring that to life, because I didn't have time to really do that for you today, but please request that, that'd be useful. And then Graham also has another great book, Client Feedback Playbook, that you can request via that QR code. So hopefully they're coming up large enough on your screen for you to be able to request, but there are also the URLs there as well. So we'd love to end this session with you thinking about what you might do next, but also to ask us any questions that you've got in mind, because we've talked through quite a lot in 54 minutes. So we'd love to hear your questions, please. I think you could raise your hand if you're live perhaps, or put it in the chat.
Yes.
Or Q&A even as well.
Yeah, we've had a couple of questions come through, but if you would like to add them, wiggle your mouse and pop them in the Q&A, or raise your hand and you can come off mute and we can have a chat. A couple that come through, probably this one for Joanna. How challenging is it to involve the whole of the client-facing team?
Yes, it can be challenging. I'm not going to say it's easy peasy, you flick a switch and everyone starts doing great BD. You often, if you take a team approach to this and do some of the work I described earlier, you'll often get 1 or 2 people that aren't keen and remain unkeen. That can very often happen. But by tackling the why, what and how, and making it feel like a team effort, we're all contributing to this, we're all learning, growing together to achieve a common goal, you can bring the majority of people in. It's about using people's strengths. It's not getting everybody to go networking next week. It's about what strengths have we got. I remember doing some work with a firm and we were talking about article writing, and one lawyer said, well, oh, it takes me 7 hours to write an article. I would argue she was probably trying to write it for a journal rather than LinkedIn or the firm's website. But someone else said, oh, it takes me an hour and a half. So yes, we could spend time getting the person it takes 7 hours to take a bit less, but probably let's use the strengths of the team and what people enjoy. So that's really important to consider in that. And I have seen lots of people change their mind and see how they can contribute.
Thanks, Joanna. Everyone here through here, as head of finance and operations, one struggle that I have is getting people to listen to finance when they have a mindset, I'm the solicitor, you're not. What would you recommend? Um, I'll happily have a go at that. That bit of a trigger warning with that question brings me back to the previous role. Um, yeah, I think I think that is a fair challenge. I think a lot of it, and it probably speaks to what Joanna was saying earlier, I think a lot of it is kind of emphasizing it's a team sport. And within that, people have different roles. I think there's perhaps some kind of low-hanging fruit-ish in terms of building that trust and that relationship around, well, look, let me take that off your plate. You know, whether that's someone in finance or that's someone in BD. Yes, you are the solicitor and you know what you're doing, you're very good at it, but is this the best use of your time? Or should I go and struggle with that spreadsheet to work out what the price might be going forward? Or should I go and run through the list of people attending that event and work out who the key people we want to target are? So I think you can start with a kind of here to help, I'm here to take it off your plate. And I think that helps build trust early on to then kind of, I think candidly, you know, get to a place where you are adding greater value and you're demonstrating that worth, but you're invited into those rooms to be able to do so rather than sort of sitting in the shadow of the solicitor to pick on the point of the question. No, Graham, Joanna, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
I think it can be difficult because lawyers like to know stuff, but it is getting everyone in a firm to think about how do we use the people we've got and use their skills in the best possible way. But that is quite an overall mind shift to get people to appreciate, I think.
Anything else, Graham? Any silver bullets, magic?
I wish I had a silver bullet. I suppose I approach it the same way with the research we do. It's evidence, so you know it's going in with um, really good evidence of your expertise, things that have from a third party that it doesn't matter what your professional qualification is. If you've got the stats to hand that show that this is the case, this is why we need to act. I think that kind of overrides it.
I think that's a good point. I think we did that with the pricing team in the last place. It was a very new function, and actually, it was that you get the wins, but then you shout about them. You know, you make a point of saying, "Look, this is what we managed to achieve. This is what the matter looked like with our involvement now versus what it looked like before." So I think that data point's a key one. To pick up on another question, you mentioned value-based pricing. How are firms adapting to that? Um, yeah, again, I'll fill that in again if either of you want to chip in. I think in a very varied way, to be honest. So I think some are looking at data internally. They're looking at time records and they're looking to enrich that data, often with AI actually, as the world is at the moment, to understand, well, what did it cost to deliver that piece of work and how then might we start abstracting away from hours times rate to start talking about a fixed fee or whatever it might be and start articulating it in terms of value terms. I think there is value in that. Again, to I suppose the finance colleagues on the call, I think you'll all appreciate that the data in your firm might look impressive, but actually when you start prodding at it, it's not great in terms of narratives. I think where we're seeing firms, I suppose, taking this seriously, it's looking then at, I suppose, the training side of it and that shift from thinking of hour times rate to think about, well, what does it feel like to be in the client's shoes and to be talking about value and how we can increase value in the transaction? That is a really big cultural shift. And so I think the other thing that needs to go alongside that is a bit of permission from the management board, from the managing partner, from the finance team, that people are going to be learning and they are going to be making mistakes with this. You know, I think it's a big enough shift as it is to then expect every single piece of work that's now priced under this new paradigm to be at least as profitable as the old way of working. I think that's a bit of an unrealistic expectation. So just creating a little bit of space for experimentation and making mistakes, I think is quite a key thing. I think that's it. I am conscious of time. I don't know if Joanna Graham, if you had anything to add, little shakes of the head. Um, we will follow up after this with an email to everybody that's attended with a link to the recording, to the action points, the next steps, the freebies that we've got on the slide. We'll send links to those as well as our contact details. But thank you very much for joining us on. I felt like I had a hailstorm above my head at one point during this, but that has now stopped. But thank you for joining us. And if you haven't had lunch yet, I wish you a good lunch and a good rest of your day. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye bye.